It's the Wright Report with your host, Benjamin Wright. That's WRIGHT, homeless news and housing policy, the right way. Hello, and welcome to the second ever episode of the Wright Report's Weekly Review. On the Weekly Review here at the Wright Report, we will be bringing you weekly headline reports of homeless news and housing policy in the Denver metro area. Maybe some national stuff too. Likely some national stuff too. The weekly report consists of a reading of local headlines in my fancy sponsor announcer's voice, followed by a quick summary of the contents, and perhaps a comment from your host. That's me, Benjamin Wright, WRIGHT. In addition to the weekly report, here at the Wright Report, we will also produce some in-depth reports of various news items, time and technology, and, well, I guess whatever talent I have allow. We were kind of behind for the release of the first episode, so no in-depth follow-ups after that one. Came out 3 days late. Episode 2 was only 1 day late, so we're hopeful of additional content this week. Stay tuned. We're getting better at this. For example, this time, we're going to remind you to like and subscribe, just like a real professional content creator. Here at the Wright Report, we feel that the most important issue in America today is housing. We would like you to be better informed by reviewing the news coverage of homelessness and housing policy, particularly paying attention to how the coverage is framed, who framed it, hence the commentary, and with a little luck, have some fun along the way. So let's get it right with the Wright Report. That's WRIGHT. Denver plans to improve safety at homeless housing sites after double homicide at former Doubletree Hotel is unsolved. City officials with the mayor's office said they have implemented new security measures at the Navigation Center, including installation of a photo badging system for staff and residents, adding more surveillance cameras, increasing DPD presence, and increasing staff presence, which includes contracted security guards. Commentary. So the only idea they have for making places safer for poor people is to turn them into prisons? Really? Because that's what's happening. Honestly, what they're trying to do is appease the neighbors. The neighborhood was complaining about the existence of this facility while it was still a proposal. All the folks from the real estate lobby needed was something. All the folks from the real estate lobby needed was for something to happen. So they could say, see, y'all should have built fancy condos there instead of letting poor people live among you. And that, my friends, is the driving force for a lot of the messaging that you will hear from the media. Kind of buried deep, but at the root, it's all designed to move poor people out and move rich people in. It's all about profit. Denver City Council greenlights raising up to $115 million to buy the former Denver Post building and the former Embassy Suites Hotel. Denver City Council approved 2 bills that will allow the city to raise up to $115 million to buy a downtown office building formerly occupied by the Denver Post and a hotel in the southeastern part of the city that is now being used as a homeless shelter. The council had previously signed off on the acquisition of both these properties. In the case of the Post building, Denver is planning to convert the 306,000 square foot high-rise into courtrooms and other judicially focused spaces to meet the projected long-term space needs for county courts starting in 2030. Of up to the $115 million, $90 million will be for the former Post building and $25 million will be for the hotel. Mayor Mike Johnson's administration originally leased the hotel, now being purchased to shelter the homeless. That acquisition, among a few others, helped the city reach Johnson's goal of housing 1,000 homeless people before 2023 ended. Commentary. People housed in that hotel are in a temporary situation. Their housing situation is not permanent in these facilities, meaning that the long-term housing situation for these folks, it's not certain. Large portion of these people are going to find themselves back out on the street when their temporary stays are done. That's because the permanent housing needed to get these people off the street permanently and stably, it's just not available. And yet,
Can you keep a
The
secret?
mayor wants to count them as housed. It's not lost on us here at the Wright Report that the largest portion of the money was set aside for the purchase of a building to process people who are in the judicial system, instead of stably housing them. Stably housing them would be the most effective thing that we could do to prevent people from entering into that system in the first place. And yet, where do we spend our money? Further down the road. Chicago begins evicting migrants from shelters, citing strain on resources. Officials say more than 2,000 people would be evicted by the end of April as volunteer groups scramble to assist them. Residents decry lack of respect. Chicago has begun evicting some migrants from its shelters, controversial policy that's been delayed for months. Migrants who have been evicted, as well as those who face rapidly approaching deadlines, said there's been widespread confusion about the process. In the first 2 days of enforcement, fewer than 10 migrants have been evicted from their shelters. According to the city, 5 migrants were forced to leave Monday because of the policy. City spokesperson said, while there were 3 evicted on Sunday. The city confirmed Sunday afternoon that the remaining 31 migrants were given extensions, 27 because they're still in the process for applying for public benefits, and 4 due to pregnancy or disability. Further in the news, Denver's historic Esquire Theater will close this summer. It is the last classic movie house in central Denver, but owners say the building still has a future. Denver's 96-year-old Esquire Theater will close this summer as exhibitor Landmark Theaters pulls out of its decades-long operation of the historic movie house. The building's owner submitted an adaptive reuse plan. That plan was approved by Denver Landmark Preservation Commission, which will allow them to redevelop the building into upscale office, restaurant, retail uses, according to a Tuesday press statement. Commentary. Note the absence of budget housing including into the potential options for this place. Every time we convert older buildings into something other than the housing that we need, we're just continuing to make our housing situation worse. I need to button a button. Does Boulder need a new historic district in the civic area? The city of Boulder is currently considering a new historic district that would link together a constellation of well-known landmarks near downtown. Advocates argue that the area has historic significance for Boulder and want to see that heritage preserved. But some community members worry that a new historic district could slow the city's efforts to market other improvements in the area. The push for the historic district originated around the bandshell. The bandshell has become a community gathering place that has served as a venue for rock concerts, protests, farmers markets, festivals, and other such events. For several years, historic preservation advocates and others in the community have been pushing to change the bandshell's landmark designation boundaries to encompass more of the surrounding area. Commentary. Landmark designation boundaries. Note the word boundaries. Do you know what currently runs around the boundaries around a lot of these areas? It's tense. Lots of homeless people trying to hang on just outside the currently fenced off areas. All they're trying to do with this piece of legislation is to increase the size of the fenced off area to where people experiencing homelessness won't have to access it. Though it doesn't appear in the public conversation, this is all about making homeless people less visible, trust me. And in this area, they're using the designation of landmark boundaries as a way to accomplishment. Federal Reserve still foresees 3 interest rate cuts this year, despite bump in inflation. Federal Reserve officials signaled Wednesday that they still expect to cut key interest rates 3 times in 2024, fueling a rally on Wall Street, despite signs that inflation remained elevated for the start of the year. For now, officials kept their benchmark rate unchanged for the 5th straight time. Oh, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. By hitting the subscribe button, you'll be notified when we create new content. Yay! So like and subscribe. It's the right way. I just did a promotional. Ooh. Winter Shelter Network donates remaining funds to HEART, HEART. A $7,188 donation provides necessities for people experiencing homelessness. Quote, we realized that our time of service had come to an end in the way that we were doing things. So our last act, the Winter Shelter Network, would like to give our remaining funds to the HEART team to help continue to serve those the Winter Shelter Network is no longer serving, said Pastor Cody Anderson from Park United Methodist. We are grateful for the HEART team and believe that they will pick up where they left off, able to serve this community in ways that we are no longer able to. End quote. Comment. No, that's not the man's real voice, just a characterization. So keep things straight between my words, the news's words, the announcer's words. Just maybe it's fun, huh? Mission Arvada Housing Navigation Center receives CCHA funding. The Colorado Community Health Alliance has awarded the Mission Arvada Housing Navigation Center $148,480 grant through its 2024 Community Incentive Program. The funding injection from CCHA empowers Mission Arvada to extend critical support to Health First Colorado, it's Medicaid, members grappling with homelessness. With this financial backing, Mission Arvada will be able to provide essential resources such as clothing, cold weather gear, bus passes to those in need. Moreover, it will facilitate the employment of 2 dedicated case managers who will play a pivotal role in assisting unhoused individuals in reclaiming vital documents, accessing supportive services, and securing long-term housing arrangements, including covering application fees and partial deposits for departments. Commentary. This commentary concerns the nature of the industrial nonprofit complex. The average salary in the Denver metro area is $67,000 plus. With the 2 new employees that is mentioned in the article, that's a total of $135,500 some odd dollars. Add in insurance plans, workers' comps, etc., and the $148,000 donation is pretty much eaten up by the cost of the 2 new employees. Now, those employees will be able to do more work and help a lot of people out, but they will not have more money available for resources as a result of this grant. On another note, you're going to want to know about AMI, Annual Median Household Income. That's AMI. Annual median income in the Denver metro area is $78,000. The thing to note is that it's the AMI number that is used in affordable housing calculations. After big projects divided North Denver neighborhoods, federal money will pay for street pedestrian crossings, new bridges, and land for community uses, all targeted in the new grant funding Globeville and Ilaria Swansea. The neighborhoods have been selected for a $35.5 million infusion of federal grant money to boost city projects aimed at better stitching them back together. Denver Mayor Mike Johnson last week called the neighborhood, which are often collectively referred to as GES, unfunded and underserved portions of the city. They're in need of direct investment to remain vibrant, he said in a news release. The grant, announced Friday, is being provided through the U.S. Department of Transportation Reconnecting Communities and Neighborhoods program. This is not the first time GES has seen substantial government investment over the last decade. Big spending has taken the form of a $1.2 billion widening of a segment of Interstate 70 and the city's ongoing billion-dollar project to overhaul and remake the National Western Center campus, just north of the highway. Commentary. $35 million to stitch together a neighborhood that was split with a $1-2 billion project? It seems a bit off.
What do you think?
Colorado's push for more high-density housing near transit irks cities, even some that allow it. Mayors say they support lawmakers' goal, but demand local control, with some municipalities willing to go to court. Colorado cities are ready for a legal fight, if necessary, to stop a state push to overhaul local housing density rules and allow more tightly packed development along train and bus routes. While many local governments support the goal of concentrating people in apartments around transit hubs, so they drive less, mayors have objected to what they see as state leaders intruding on local power. It's the same local control problem that led to the defeat of a similar state push last year in the Colorado legislature. Lawmakers received the transit-focused housing density bill last month and are moving it through the state house. Quote, "If the state tries to force this issue, the courts will concur with us, as they have before," Colorado Municipal League Executive Director Ken Bomer said, referring to legal precedents that buttress municipal quote-unquote home rule authority over land use. Determining where developers can build and how densely is not a state power, Bomer said. That is a matter of local concern. End quote. Commentary. All right, here's an organization to remember, the Colorado Municipal League. This is a collection of various cities and municipalities. They'll continually argue for local rule. As more legislation to change zoning requirements come up, they're always going to push back, just as they have in the past. Now, mayors in these communities, they know their constituents want higher density places like this because they know it's needed, but they have a problem. The people and the institutions who funded their campaigns, they don't want this high density. Those institutions want lower density luxury developments. So the mayor's job is to respond by sounding sympathetic to their constituents, but then vote with the institutions and the people that funded their political campaigns. This leads us to a wash, rinse, repeat comment that you'll probably hear a lot over the weeks. Political leaders respond by sounding sympathetic to their constituents, but vote with the institutions that fund their political campaigns. Wash, rinse, repeat. Political leaders respond to sounding sympathetic to their constituents, but vote with the institutions that fund their political campaigns. Wash, rinse, repeat. Political leaders respond by sounding sympathetic to their constituents, but vote with the institutions that fund their political campaigns. Wash, rinse, repeat. Political leaders respond by sounding sympathetic to their constituents, but vote with the institutions that fund their political campaigns. Wash, rinse, repeat. And now, even more news. AOC and Sanders aim to place public housing at the center of Green New Deal proposal. Aims to decarbonize all of nation's public housing units with investments of between $162 and $234 billion over the next decade. The bill's single biggest policy change is that it would repeal the Faircloth Amendment, a rule that is little known to the broader public but familiar to policy wonks. Since its enactment in 1999, the amendment has effectively blocked the Department of Housing and Urban Development from funding new public housing. Commentary. So with no one outside the market to compete with the private market, what they did do was make housing as absolutely as expensive as they possibly could. And now look what we've done. Look at all the homelessness we made. More commentary. Exactly one day after the announcement of this proposed housing legislation, guess who thought they needed to say something? Yep, the Biden administration. Here we go. Biden suggests a bigger federal role to reduce housing costs. A new report focuses on the prolonged struggle to build affordable housing across America and suggest federal incentives to help. Economists in the Biden administration are calling for more aggressive federal action to drive down costs for home buyers and renters, taking aim at the biggest economic challenges facing President Biden as he runs for re-election. The policy proposals in a White House report being released on Thursday include what could be an aggressive federal intervention in local politics, which often dictates where homes are built and who can occupy them. The administration is backing a plan to pressure cities and other localities to relax zoning restrictions that in many cases hinder affordable housing construction. That part of the recommendation is part of a new deep dive from the administration into the housing crisis. Commentary. This is Biden. He was in Congress for decades, and another decade as vice president. You ever remember him introducing housing bills when he was in Congress? Do you remember him proposing housing legislation when he was the vice president? It is the opinion of the Wright Report that this proposal is just for show, and in response to the Green New Deal introduced the day before. He's just merely attempting to look busy, to look busy, to look busy, to look busy, without actually changing anything. Also, this is a New York Times article. Being that it's from the New York Times, a paper of record, there's likely something to be said about this article being used as a way to form a national narrative. Like many New York Times article, it was republished in many local publications, including our own Denver Post, which is how I came onto it. Hey, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. By hitting the subscribe button, you're going to be notified when we create new content. So like and subscribe. It's the right way. Back to the news. Some state Medicaid offices target dead people's homes. The federal government requires of every state to recover money from the assets of dead people who in their final years relied on Medicaid, the taxpayer-funded health insurance for the poorest Americans. A person's home is typically exempt from qualifying for Medicaid, but it's subject to the estate recovery process for those who were 55. For those who were over 55 and used Medicaid to pay for long-term care, such as nursing home or stays in in-home health care. This month, a Democratic lawmaker proposed scuttling the cruel program altogether. Critics argue that the program collects too little, roughly about 1%, of the more than $150 billion Medicaid spends yearly on long-term care. They also say many states fail to warn people who sign up for Medicaid that big bills and claims to their property might await their families once they die. Commentary. Losing your home to Medicaid reclamation because you got sick for a long time is one of the ways in which generational family wealth can be lost. As a result, other members of a family like this, they'll become more vulnerable to homelessness when a life crisis hits. They're more likely to become homeless and stay homeless for longer because the family hasn't have the resources to help be supportive of their family members in need. Because the family no longer has a place for them to retreat to while they're working on resolving their crises. So more is lost than equity in the house. In addition, the family's ability to support other family members during this crisis, that's lost as well. And you can just extrapolate that out to all different kinds of medical costs. The shelter census for immigrants dips below 1,000 for the first time in 6 months. Sarah Plastino, Denver's recently hired program director, called the dip in numbers a, quote, turning point for the city, end quote, during a lull in seasonal migration patterns, which could ramp up in the spring. On Thursday afternoon, 941 migrants were staying in Denver city shelters. Commentary. Did you know that Denver provides a separate temporary shelter system for immigrants than for our homeless?
Can you keep a secret?
Now, a lot of immigrants who are unable to access those shelters enter into the regular shelter system. Others wind up out on the streets. It's layered, it's complicated, it's messy. And it's all because there's not enough shelter to support and take care of those who are needing it, let alone enough long-term permanent housing. Remember, shelters are supposed to be for temporary emergencies. They're not supposed to be our response to housing people. They should mostly be empty. And then times of crisis, fill up, and then be mostly empty when times are stable, and then fill up when crisis. They can't be burgeoning at the end, at the seams all the time, and then when you have a crisis, expect something not to break and explode. National plan to look into homeowners insurers hits a hurdle roughly 2 weeks after state regulators said they were collecting details on insurers' homeowners' businesses. Key states may opt out, undermining the whole effort. That's a well-written title. A sweeping effort by state regulators to find out why homeowners insurance is so expensive and hard for customers to secure is already facing challenges, as some crucial states say they may opt out of the call for data. The request is the biggest and broadest request for information that insurance companies have had to face from a regulator in decades. Such granular data has never been collected on a national level. Regulators say that even without full participation, the program is still an enormous advancement in their quest to understand what's happening with homeowners insurance. Further in the news, DeSantis signs law banning homeless people from sleeping in public areas. People experiencing homelessness in Florida will be banned from sleeping overnight on the streets, on the sidewalks, and in parks under the law signed this week by Governor Ron DeSantis. People experiencing homelessness in Florida will be banned from sleeping overnight on the streets, on the sidewalks, and in the parks under a law signed this week by Governor Ron DeSantis. He's a Republican. Which he characterized as a law and order step that would help unhoused people, but some homeless advocates warned it would be ineffective. The governor's office said the bill, which DeSantis signed Wednesday, would give homeless people resources to, quote, get back on their feet. While aiming to increase public safety, critics have said the law does not address root causes of homelessness or provide for long-term solutions. This article is full of goop that is repeated and repeated and repeated in many places where local communities are trying to expel homeless people in their area out of visibility. The goop sounds things like promises to give homeless people resources without naming them, aiming to increase public safety, which and the aims to increase the quality of life, except for those who are homeless. The resources never include housing. The actions they take are never safer for the homeless community, and the quality of homeless communities' life never increases when communities respond with camping bans. But this is an example of what home rules are designed to do. They determine who is and who isn't seen in the public square. A lot of bigotry and racism can be found behind these kinds of ordinances. Typically, these home rule type ordinances are limited to a particular group of people. Think Jim Crow, think sundown laws. Zoning codes designated to encourage luxury development instead of budget options for the people are another example. Why are so many voters frustrated by the U.S. economy? It's home prices. The United States is slogging through a housing affordability crisis that was decades in the making. At the root of this problem, America failed to build enough homes for its growing population. The shortage strikes at the heart of the American dream of home ownership, dampening President Biden's assurances that the U.S. economy is strong and undergoing the degree to which Republican Donald Trump, the former president and presumptive GOP nominee for 2024, has largely overlooked the shortage. The lack of housing has caused a record number of renters to devote an excessive amount of income to housing, according to a Harvard University analysis. Not enough homes are for sale or being built, keeping prices elevated. Average mortgage rates have been more than doubled and further worsened affordability. Commentary. Typically, they talk about everything else but housing. Occasionally, something big will happen, like the housing crisis of 2008, but they'll pretend like it's not still going on. Here's an example of how bad things have gotten over the decades. Back in the 80s, old Reagan cut the housing budget, and the first response from the housing industry was a mortgage crisis. Remember the savings and loan crisis back then? Now, the fallout of that was over 1,000 people went to jail. The government repossessed all the houses, and then they reintroduced them into the market at a discounted rate. However, 2008, when that mortgage crisis hit, nobody went to jail. The banks kept all the houses on the market. They didn't reintroduce them at discounts, and the government subsidized those same banks with $750–800 billion or something crazy like that. And we wonder why we have an issue with housing 15 years later. None of these guys have received any of the kinds of consequences for the BS that they've been pulling on the public for decades. Without consequences, these thieves will continue to steal. Colorado poised to ban cities' limits on how many people can live together. If signed by Governor Polis, the bill would be the first land use reform bill passed this season. Colorado lawmakers are poised to ban occupancy limits in cities and towns across the state, clearing the way for more roommates to live together as part of Democrats' push to reform local housing resolution. That's regulations, and address the state's housing crisis. Roughly 24 cities and towns in Colorado have the type of occupancy limits that would be prohibited under HB 24-1007, which cleared the state Senate on Tuesday. The measure would prohibit local governments from limiting how many unrelated people can live in one home or housing unit, except for health and safety reasons. Pending anticipated final approval from the House, the bill next heads to Governor Polis, who's expected to sign it. And when the bill becomes law, it will be the second land use bill enacted since the governor and lawmaker began publicly advocating for reforms last year. A bill banning growth limits became law after last session. What this bill is about at its core is the foundational question. What this bill about at its core, the foundational question, is power, said Senator Minority Leader Paul London. London represents Monument, which is one of several cities that are opposed ending occupancy limits. Commentary. Now we get to the crux of the matter, local control types. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. By hitting the subscribe button, you'll be notified about new content as we create. By hitting that subscribe button, you'll be notified about new content as we create it. So like and subscribe. It's the right way. How many times have I reminded you about this? I think we're doing good. Back to the news. Student housing pioneer faces angry investors. Patrick S. Nelson, a prominent figure of off-campus student housing sector, finds himself embroiled in tumultuous legal battles, facing mounting debts totaling a staggering of $115 million. The once thriving business built by Nelson is now plagued by lawsuits, bad investors, and judicial scrutiny, painting a grim picture of the embattled entrepreneur, according to a report from the New York Times. At the heart of the controversy lies Nelson's failure to fulfill financial obligations to his business partners, a fact exasperated by his refusal to comply with court orders. Despite escalating fines and interest, Nelson remains defiant, eliciting frustration among investors and lenders alike. Further news: closing costs for buying a home have risen along with rates. Typical loan closing costs when completing a home purchase include loan origination fees, discount points, appraisal and credit report fees, lender insurance. All rose almost 22% from 2021 to 2022, according to a report by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Flawed community plan updates worsen LA's housing crisis. Despite the City Council's orders, community plan updating process is painfully slow. In the past 17 years, LA City Council has adopted 7 new community plans. These plans, as well as 30 others, must be updated again. But the planning department is only updating 17 community plans for the San Fernando Valley, Southeast San Fernando Valley, Hollywood, West Los Angeles, downtown. None of these updates have a draft text, a draft environmental impact report, and an appended zoning ordinance. The preparation will drag on for years, especially if the completed plans are legally challenged. Based on current nationwide policies, including in Los Angeles, the upzoning ordinances that implemented updated community plans must also be prepared and adopted. The upzoning ordinances that implemented updated community plans must also be prepared and adopted. These zoning ordinances are based on conservative neoliberal bipartisan tenets that the private sector, not public agencies, should build affordable housing, but to do so require top-down economic incentives, especially density bonuses. Well, that was a mouthful. Commentary. Basically, this is why when you hear our politicians say that when we need to build more housing, you need to check on what kind of housing they're referring to. If all they're doing is building more expensive stuff, top down, that's what they mean by that, it's just going to make our housing crisis worse. Instead, we need to be building budget housing. But the reality in the real world is that rich people and the institutions that they run are donating to the campaigns of the policymakers. And when it comes to housing policy, they all clamor for those folks to build my luxury stuff first. Me first, me first, me first. In the end, by not building for those with the greatest need, it hurts us all. Political leaders respond by sounding sympathetic to their constituents, but vote with institutions that fund their political campaigns. Wash, rinse, repeat. Political leaders respond by sounding sympathetic to their constituents, but vote with institutions that fund their political campaigns. Wash, rinse, repeat. Thank you for watching the Wright Report Week in Review, March 17th, 2024, with your host, Benjamin Wright. That's WRIGHT. Homeless News and Housing Policy, the right way. Links to all the reference articles are available in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe to get notifications of in-depth analysis of reports when they become available. Until then, we'll see you next week here at the Wright Report. That's WRIGHT. Homeless News and Housing Policy, the right way.